I think now that we know a little bit more about what has been going on in Robert Mueller's life recently, now that we have seen his letter, which was made public yesterday, which is him memorializing in print and laying out clearly the battle that he has been in with Attorney General William Barr over Barr misrepresenting Mueller's findings and trying to submarine Mueller's whole investigation and misrepresenting it to the public. I mean, one of the things that does is it puts Mueller himself back at the center of this drama. After what we have now seen and heard about the behavior of Attorney General William Barr when it comes to Mueller and Mueller's report, it should be no surprise that committee chairmen and members of the judiciary committees are going to open up communication with Mueller directly, rather than routing anything through William Barr ever again. I mean, at this point, based on what we've seen just from Mueller himself, it's clear that Attorney General William Barr is the last person on earth you should be contacting if you are seeking true information about Robert Mueller or his investigation. Because now we've got Mueller on the record saying that Barr has been mischaracterizing his work and mishandling his work. Right? So the whole idea that Barr is the one that you go to if you want to know anything about this investigation or about Mueller himself, that's over now. Barr himself today elected not to turn up to testify in front of the House Judiciary Committee. That will probably take some time to resolve as a conflict. Barr had initially volunteered to testify today. That's what he backed out of. He wasn't subpoenaed to testify. Now they will likely subpoena him to testify. If he refuses to testify in response to the subpoena, they'll have to fight that. Ultimately, they may decide to hold him in contempt of Congress. That, too, will be a somewhat lengthy process. By the time Barr finally does agree to sit down in front of Jerry Nadler and the House Judiciary Committee and their professional staff, we will presumably by that point be some distance further down the road in this ongoing scandal. One side benefit of that delay is that by that point, William Barr will hopefully no longer be seen as the guy who you're supposed to ask questions of about Robert Mueller. By that point, whenever he does sit down with House Judiciary, whenever he does decide that he's willing to face Democrats' questions, he will presumably no longer be thought of as the guy who's supposed to explain Robert Mueller. At this point, by the time that's going to happen, by the time he sits down and does that, the reason they're going to want to talk to him is no longer going to be that Barr is the one who's explaining Mueller, right? At that point, presumably the reason they will want to talk to William Barr is because of Barr's own behavior, is because of what Mueller himself says is Barr's mishandling of his investigation, his misrepresentation of Mueller's findings, his creation of public confusion about what Mueller did and Mueller found. And to that point of William Barr's behavior and what he has done here and how it may still be affecting what we know about this investigation and what impact it's having on this presidency. To that point, after his testimony yesterday, we are still trying to get to the bottom of this.
Was it Special Counsel Mueller's responsibility to make a charging recommendation?
I think the Deputy Attorney General and I thought it was, but not just charging, but to determine whether or not conduct was criminal. The president would be charged, could not be charged as long as he was in office.
Do you agree with the reasons that he offered for not making a decision in Volume 2 of his report, and why or why not?
I'm not really sure of his reasoning. I think that if he felt that he shouldn't go down the path of making a traditional prosecutive decision, then he shouldn't have investigated. That was the time to pull up.
That was the time to pull up, right? They said, oh, I'm going to land this plane. No, I guess they said, pull it up. Right? I mean, the Justice Department and Attorney General William Barr have confirmed that Robert Mueller told Barr that he didn't believe he was allowed to make a declaration as to whether or not President Trump committed crimes because of the Justice Department policy that says you can't charge a sitting president. As Mueller explained in his report, if you can't charge someone, it's not fair to accuse them of a crime. And the whole point of charging someone is that you then give them their day in court so they can defeat the charges. They can beat the charges so they didn't commit the crime, so they can clear their name so they can be acquitted. You don't give an accused criminal that right if they never get their day in court, right? If you only accuse them of crimes without actually charging them and putting them on trial and letting them prove they didn't do it. Right, that was Mueller's reasoning. Whether or not you agree with that reasoning, that is what Mueller explained in his report about why he felt constrained by Justice Department policy, that he couldn't say one way or the other whether the president committed crimes when it came to obstruction of justice. Well, William Barr and the Justice Department say that they learned that was Mueller's position at a meeting between Barr and Mueller on March 5th. March 5th of this year. That's the first time the two of these guys met after William Barr was sworn in as Attorney General, after he was cleared by the Justice Department Ethics Office to take over oversight of Mueller's work. Well, how did William Barr respond to that newsflash from Mueller? When Mueller told Barr on March 5th that he believed he couldn't make a traditional prosecutive decision about the president, how did Barr take that? How did he respond? Well, now we know in his own words.
I think that if he felt that he shouldn't go down the path of making a traditional prosecutive decision, then he shouldn't have investigated. That was the time to pull up.
So that was the time to pull up. If you're not making a charging decision, and you say you're not, then the way William Barr thinks about it means you can't be investigating. You can't be using grand juries, you can't be using subpoenas, you can't be using all of the tools that prosecutors use to investigate toward the ultimate aim of assembling a criminal case. You can't do that. You can't use any of those tools, not if you're not going to assemble a criminal case, not if you're not going to file charges. You can't be investigating if at the end of the day you are not going to charge, says the brand new Attorney General, newly installed to oversee Robert Mueller's work. And less than 3 weeks after that first meeting, we get word from the Justice Department that Robert Mueller's investigation is over and his report is in. 2.5 weeks after Barr was allowed to take over oversight of the Mueller investigation, the Mueller investigation was ended. Did Barr end it basically as soon as he got into the Justice Department? What he has explained since then in public testimony is his own belief that Mueller had no right to even look at potential obstruction of justice by the president, to investigate the president's conduct at all. Not if Mueller, at the end of the day, wasn't going to declare whether or not the president could be charged with a crime. So we're still trying to figure that out. I will note for the record, just as an aside, that there are like 2 volumes of the Mueller report, right? Volume 1's about Russia, Volume 2 is about obstruction. Volume 2, the obstruction section, it both starts and ends with Robert Mueller justifying and defending the fact that his office had been conducting this investigation of the president's behavior in the first place, justifying and defending the fact that they were investigating the president for obstruction of justice, even though they weren't considering charging him. I mean, the way he described it at the very end, the very final section of Volume 2 of the report, that was Mueller's defense of the fact that his office was working to, quote, ascertain whether the president violated obstruction statutes. Their defense of the fact that they were even trying to ascertain that by investigating the president's behavior is the end, is the closing argument of the obstruction section. That's page 178. It's the very last thing they argue. That same defense of the fact that they were investigating the president at all is literally on page 1 of the obstruction section, says, quote, while the OLC opinion concludes that a sitting president may not be prosecuted, it recognizes that a criminal investigation during the president's term is permissible. So why is it that Robert Mueller and the special counsel's office felt it was necessary to open and close the whole obstruction section of their report with a defense of the fact that they had been investigating the president at all? Who was asking them to justify that? I mean, is that at all related to the fact that the Attorney General has now articulated multiple times in public that he believes if Mueller wasn't going to say at the end of the day whether President Trump committed crimes or not, then Mueller shouldn't have been investigating Trump at all? At that point, the investigation is inappropriate. I mean, did Barr shut Mueller down when Mueller told him he wasn't going to say whether or not Trump should be charged? If so, was the grounds on which he did so that Barr thinks that that precludes you from even investigating? I don't know, and neither do you. But Robert Mueller knows. And now, according to this new reporting from NBC News tonight, the Judiciary Committee in the House is negotiating with Mueller directly to arrange his testimony, whereupon he can presumably tell us that and everything else he knows. Here's the flip side, though, which I think is the worrying part here for Attorney General William Barr and for the White House. I mean, over the last 24 hours or so, you've seen headlines like this one, right? Republicans turn against Mueller. You have seen the Attorney General himself calling Mueller snitty, saying that Mueller's whole investigation was based on a false accusation and it was illegitimate. We saw this letter today from the president's Russia lawyer, from Emmett Flood, deriding Robert Mueller, saying that what Mueller turned in was some sort of law school exam paper, saying all that Mueller's investigation produced was a bunch of political statements in that report. Emmett Flood sneering at Mueller's report and his findings by calling the report from Mueller a, quote, prosecutorial curiosity. We're watching Republicans in Congress and the White House and the president's legal defenders all starting to round on Robert Mueller. Forget all this stuff of like, oh, Mueller's an honorable guy. Oh, Mueller's exonerated the president. No, now it's Mueller is deranged. Mueller is terrible at his job. Mueller's a disaster. And the problem for them as they make that turn is that Mueller is alive and Mueller is starting to communicate with the outside world in his own terms. That we now know includes at least some lines of communication directly from the Judiciary Committees to him. And that puts William Barr and the Trump White House in a bit of a corner here, because in order to try to cast aspersions on what was wrong with Mueller's investigation and what's deficient about Mueller himself, in order possibly to have justified shutting down Mueller's investigation in the first place once Barr took over as Attorney General, they've had to make this very aggressive argument about what it is that Mueller did wrong, right? What was so wrong about Mueller saying that he felt constrained by Justice Department policy such that he did not believe he was allowed to say whether or not the president committed crimes. They have hung their hat on that being the disaster of what Mueller did, right? I mean, here's how Barr himself put it in his opening statement for the Senate yesterday. Quote, the role of the federal prosecutor and the purpose of a criminal investigation are well defined. Federal prosecutors work with grand juries to collect evidence to determine whether a crime has been committed. Once a prosecutor has exhausted his investigation into the facts of a case, he or she faces a binary choice to either commence or decline prosecution. The appointment of a special counsel and the investigation of the conduct of the president do not change these rules. At the end of the day, the federal prosecutor must decide yes or no. The federal prosecutor must decide yes or no. Ryan Goodman singled out this part of Barr's opening statement yesterday at Just Security, noting that, this might make for great rhetoric from Barr, deriding Mueller, claiming that Mueller didn't do his job, but it also creates a really big problem for what happens next, as long as Mueller is alive and can speak for himself on his own terms. Quote, in his report, Mueller took the view that he didn't have authority under the Justice Department's legal opinions to make a federal criminal accusation against a sitting president. Barr's statement to the Senate now resets that framework. Indeed, Barr's clarification of the rules appears to state that Mueller has a duty to make exactly that call about the president. Whether or not Barr articulated this legal framework to justify his decision in the Mueller investigation, what it means is that special counsel Robert Mueller may now be able, or in fact required, to say on the record whether he believes President Donald Trump committed the crime of obstruction. Mueller should have the opportunity to do so in congressional testimony soon. In other words, all these guys, Barr and all the rest of them, they're all roundly denouncing Mueller for having botched his investigation when he refused to state whether or not he believes that President Trump committed crimes. I mean, it may in fact be possible that Barr told Mueller his investigation must end if he was going to continue to refuse to say if President Trump committed crimes. Well, Robert Mueller is about to come to Congress and testify, as far as we can tell. And if this whole attack on Mueller's findings and what might have been the whole effort to shut down Mueller once Barr took over at the Justice Department was all based on it being a huge problem that Mueller wouldn't say whether or not Trump should be charged. If Barr is demanding now that what the Justice Department rules say is that Robert Mueller must declare if Donald Trump committed crimes, well, it no longer matters that Mueller didn't do that in his report. Right? Now we're in the new phase where the report may be the past on that point. And in the future, what this will mean is that Robert Mueller will be sworn in before a congressional committee, and he will be asked by Jerry Nadler or by Amy Klobuchar or by Kamala Harris or any of these folks. And Robert Mueller will not just be able to explain under oath whether or not he believes the president committed crimes, he may be obligated under the Justice Department rules, as newly explained by Attorney General William Barr. He may be obligated to say, to declare, if the president is a criminal and if that is what his investigation found. That is the box that Attorney General William Barr has created for himself and for the White House with the way that he has attacked Robert Mueller. And now it is Robert Mueller's time to speak. More ahead. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.